Welcome, everybody. Today on Be Rad at Something, I have Terry Tucker, and he is the founder of Motivational Check LLC. And he's been a NCAA Division I basketball player, a SWAT hostage negotiator, and a cancer warrior for the past 12 years. And I've listened to your story a bit on the social media and stuff you have, and I enjoy your posts on X, your Motivational Monday messages that you collect from everybody. So I'm glad to have you on the podcast today. I set up the matchmaker profile and you hit me up, and I think we're a match. So I'd like to hear your story, and let's have a good chat.
Well, Brad, I'm really looking forward to talking with you today. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I just got this podcast set up. It's more of like kind of a hobby, but something I've always been interested in. And this stems from me doing work for 20 years that I don't really love anymore. And this audio video stuff has been something that I always have loved and seem to have some kind of talents at. And I've also heard you tell a little bit of the same kind of story. You started in one career, you did another. So I guess if you want to start with that or whatever you like to start with, that'd be great.
Sure. So, grew up in the South Side Chicago, oldest of three boys. You can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall. And as you mentioned, I was able to play Division I college basketball at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina. After college, I moved home to find a job. This is really going to date myself now, long before the internet was available to help people find employment. I found that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. That was the good news. The bad news was I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mom care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. After Wendy's, I actually went to work for the hospital that cared for my father and my grandmother. And then at 37 years old, I made a major pivot in my life and became a police officer. And part of what I did during my law enforcement career was I was a SWAT hostage negotiator. After that, I started a school security consulting business. I coached girls' high school basketball when we lived in Texas. But for the last 12 plus years now, I've been battling a rare form of cancer, a rare form of melanoma. And then I guess just finally, my wife and I have been married for 31 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military, the Space Force.
That's cool. So I guess just listening to this stuff, what do you feel has guided you through all these different changes? I mean, did you do the management like at Wendy's because of your passion for managing, or what kind of things are you following to make all these changes throughout your life?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at my resume, it kind of looks like a Super Bowl went off in the room. It's just kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
But there is a backstory, and if you understand the backstory, the resume makes a little more sense, I guess.
Right.
So my grandfather, my dad's father, was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954. And in 1933, he was actually shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury. He was shot in the ankle. But my dad, who was an infant at the time, always remembered the stories my grandmother told of that knock on the door. Mrs. Tucker, grab your son, come with us. Your husband's been shot. And so when I expressed an interest in sort of following in my grandfather's footsteps, my dad was absolutely not. You're going to college. You're going to major in business. You're going to get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids, and live happily ever after. But that's the life my father wanted me to live. That's not the life I felt I was supposed to live. But as I said, when I graduated from college, my father and my grandmother, who lived with us at the time, were both dying of different forms of cancer. So I had a kind of a really major decision in my life. I could have said, hey, Dad, I know you're dying, but too bad, I'm going to go blaze my own trail and do my own thing. Or out of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do. So understanding that now, I went into business because that's what my dad wanted me to do. And I sort of joke, I did what every good son did. I waited till my father passed away. And then I followed my purpose. I followed what I felt I was supposed to do, which was to go in law enforcement. And Brad, I'll be honest with you, one of the things I'm most proud about in my life is that I never let that dream die.
Right on.
I was working in hospital administration. I could have been like, hey, comfortable job, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. I'm good at it. Well, you know what? I'll just stay here because it's comfortable. But I gave that up, certainly with the help of in the support of my wife and my daughter, to go do what I felt in my heart was what I was supposed to do, and that was to go into law enforcement.
That's amazing. I appreciate you hanging on to that dream, but still taking care of the moral things that are always above the worldly things. Kind of find myself in the same position too, and yeah, I've tried to let go of the dream, and it went negatively for me. But I found even while doing all these other worldly things that I may not think I really want to do, if I find a little bit of time to do the things I know that I'm passionate about, then I still feel okay, and I'm able to do all of it. So I appreciate you sticking with yours, and yeah, I don't know. It just, there's a feeling sometimes when you feel like maybe I should grow up and just go off and work and do what everybody else wants or whatever. There's a bunch of pulls that way, but yeah, for me either, I can't tell this stuff no. So I just keep doing it, and now it has me here today talking to you with somebody that has kind of the same message. So yeah, we even have a similar story, taking care of a parent with cancer right now, and you can do all that stuff. You need to do all that stuff. I just appreciate that you tried to help everybody, all while not letting go of your dream.
Exactly. And you know, my parents gave my brothers and I everything. I mean, we are, you know, I played college basketball. My younger brother was a pitcher for the University of Notre Dame, and my middle brother was drafted by the Cleveland Cavaliers in the National Basketball Association. So we grew up, I don't have any sisters, so we grew up with sports. I mean, that's what we did. My parents used to practice what I call divide and conquer parenting, where, you know, I would have a game on Thursday night at 5 o'clock at this location, and my brother would have a practice at 5 o'clock at another location. So, you know, dad's going with me, mom's taking Larry, and our whole life, our whole family revolved around sports. But that's really, I mean, I think the lesson without, my parents never came out and said this, but what they demonstrated, what they modeled was what family was all about loving each other, of caring for each other, of supporting each other. And I remember when I was working at Wendy's, when my dad was dying of cancer, my youngest brother was in high school. And I remember he had a basketball game one night. And I told my dad, I said, hey, I'm not going to Brian's game. I'm going to go work out after work. And my dad's like, no, you're not. And I was like, well, wait a minute. I'm a man. I've got my own job. I'm an adult here, obviously not acting like one. But, you know, my dad was like, no, you're going to your brother's game. I said, no, I'm not. I'm going to work out. It's been a couple days. I need to go get a workout in. And, you know, he kind of put it in perspective for me. He said, you know, Terry, your youngest brother's dad is dying. He knows that. You know that. He needs you there. He needs your support. He needs to know that other members of the family are there to support him. And my dad was absolutely right. I was just being a jerk, you know, of trying to sort of flex my own muscles, like, look at me, I can be independent. But my parents taught us what family was about. And I think my brothers and I have tried to pass that down through our families and to our children and things like that. So, you know, my story is not one where, you know, my parents beat each other or they were alcoholics. I was just the opposite. I had great parents. I had parents who loved us and supported us and did everything they could to make sure that we were happy and successful. And I think now it's incumbent upon my brothers and I to pass that on to our families as well.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely that feeling of, yeah, I'm growing up now. I should be able to do the things that I think I need to be going and doing. Thankful you had the family tie there, your anchor to keep you sane, because, yeah, you got to got to figure out a way to do it all. But so, did you
Yeah.
guys do any kind of church or any spiritual centering or guidance?
Yeah, I mean, my faith has always been an integral part of my life growing up. Whether it was when I was in high school, I had 3 knee surgeries, and so the ability to play college basketball on any level was almost something I didn't even think about. It's like nobody's going to take me with 3 knee surgeries. And after my second knee surgery, they told me they took out 25 pieces of my bone. I'd had an infection when I had my cartilage removed, and when I went back playing basketball, it was just bone on bone. And so they kept chipping off. And this was long before MRIs and CAT scans and stuff were able to image and look inside and see. So, well, we're going to do an experimental surgery or an exploratory surgery and see what's going on in there. And they took out 25 pieces of my bone, put me in a cast from my hip to my ankle for the entire summer, and told me I'd never play basketball again. And I remember thinking, well, you don't know me. You don't know what I'm capable of. And every Sunday after I had the cast removed in the fall before basketball started, my mother used to load us all into the car with my dad, and we would drive downtown Chicago to Columbus Hospital, which was a shrine for we're Catholic, so St. Francis Xavier Cabrini. And we would look, it was almost a little museum, like her bed or table or chair or clothing and things like that. And my mom would always talk to the nun who was running the gift shop. And she was a kind of portly woman from Italy, had the Italian accent. And she and my mom became best friends. And we would always leave there with a brown bag full of, prayer cards and relics and holy water. I swear at one point in time, we had enough holy water, we could all take in a bath in it. I mean, it was so much holy water. So faith has always been an integral part of my life. I talk about faith, family, and friends, my 3 Fs, which has gotten me through so far this 12-year battle with cancer.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, we do a home fellowship thing of our own, and the faith portion is the only reason I can and have done anything I've learned. And I've even learned, I've come at it in the beginning from, God get me out of a jam, to every day when I start out, God, please help me again today, because you helped me yesterday and it made all the difference, and I need your help again today. I've had to learn that it's a daily thing, not just when you're in a jam. It's like putting on a shield of armor first and then going out through the day. So, and
Absolutely.
yeah.
No, I was just going to say that, I've learned that through cancer. When I was diagnosed in 2012, I was told I'd be dead in 2 years. I have a rare form of melanoma that they really had no treatment for. They're like, well, if it's somewhere surgically we can remove it, we will. But other than that, we don't have anything for you. So, get your affairs in order. And I thought, well, you've given me a death sentence. Maybe I can try to turn that death sentence into a life sentence. And like I said, I've always had a strong faith. So it was not, I leaned on that faith even more. But one of the things that my doctor did, because there was no treatment, is she put me on a weekly injection of a drug called interferon, as she used to say, to try to kick the can down the road. We're just trying to buy you time. This is not going to cure you or anything like that. But the side effects of those interferon injections were that I had terrible flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after I took them. And I took those weekly injections for almost 5 years. So imagine having a terrible case of the flu every week for 5 years,
Man.
and knowing that this wasn't going to cure you. It wasn't like, well, I can put up with this, knowing that at the end of this, it's going to be where I'm healthy again. No, we were just buying time. And I remember gotten to the point where I was so sick of being sick that I literally prayed to die. I never contemplated suicide, but it was like, okay, God, there's living and there's not dying. And I'm in the not dying stage. I am not living in any way, shape, or form. At least I didn't feel I was. So take me out of this. And obviously, God didn't take me out of it. And then fast forward to 2020, I have my leg amputated in the middle of the COVID pandemic. I found out I have tumors in my lungs, which I still have. And I remember my doctor showed me my CAT scan. And Brad, I don't know how to read a CAT scan. I have no medical background at all, but
Yeah.
you can kind of look at it and be like, well, that sure doesn't look like it belongs there. I had these big tumors in my lungs. They had fluid all around the pleural spaces of my lungs. Not to be gross, but I was, coughing up green bloody phlegm. And I remember looking at my doctor and saying, how was I alive? And I will never forget this till the day I die. He put his head down, he shook his head no, and then he looked up at me and he said, I don't know,
Wow.
because you shouldn't have been. What said to me, God's not done with me yet. When I die, where I die, how I die, I always kind of joke, way above my pay grade. Don't spend nearly as much time worrying about the dying as much as I do focused on the living.
Yeah. So this focus on the living, then you're trying to get your message out and help others. God still needs you to do that. So that's pretty amazing. So is it kind of the same story right now? Just everything's at bay and you're still doing what you're doing? I mean, is there's still not like a length of time where you should survive all this, or?
No, like I said, so 2020, I find out I have these tumors in my lungs. My entire lower leg is full of cancer, so I have to have an above the knee amputation. And my doctor wanted to put me on chemotherapy. And I was 8 years, into that fight. And I was like, is it going to save my life? And he was like, probably not, but it might buy you some more time. And I said, well, if the outcome is going to be the same, whether I take chemo or I don't think I want to go through all that pain and that ugliness. I'd rather spend whatever time I have left with my family. I said, but I'll go home and talk to my family about it. And it's a funny story, but it really did happen this way. So I go home and I start telling, my wife and daughter about what the doctor is recommending. And my daughter's immediately, all right, we need a family meeting. I'm like, family meeting? There's three of us. It's not like we had a board here or something like that, So we sit around the kitchen table and individually talk about how everybody feels about me having chemo. And then after that's done, my daughter's like, all right, let's take a vote. How many people want dad to have chemotherapy? And my wife and daughter raised their hand. I'm like, wait, am I getting outvoted for something that I don't want to do? But I remembered when I was back in the police academy, our defensive tactics instructor used to have us bring a photograph of the people we loved the most to class. And as we were learning different techniques to defend ourselves, we were to look at that photograph, because he reasoned you will fight harder for the people you love than you will fight for yourself. So I ended up taking chemotherapy, not because I wanted to, but because my wife and daughter, who I love more than myself, wanted me to. And in hindsight, it was the bridge, it was the medication that got me to the clinical trial drug that I've been on for almost 4 years now, that has really kept, let me rephrase that. It's my own immune system that's sort of keeping the cancer at bay right now. But the way it's doing that is this drug that I'm taking goes in and kind of wipes out the protein or the enzyme that cancer secretes to hide itself from your own immune system, so that my immune system can be just like when you have a cold or a flu virus and say, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't belong here. We need to go attack it. So in a lot of ways, it's my own body that's keeping the tumors stable.
Wow.
The idea of being stable, they're still there, but they have not grown in 4 years.
That's great. Yeah, that just reminds me of, it seems like we're all here to help other people. And when we help other people, our needs are met, whatever they are. And couple that with, if we're doing the right thing, definitely the needs are going to be met. So I appreciate hearing that in your story there too. You didn't do, again, this is maybe the third example so far of this podcast. You didn't exactly do again what you wanted to do, but you went to where you could be helpful. And then that was a bridge for you to get this other medication. And now you're able to just keep on keeping on. So I guess hopefully by now you probably understand that that's the whole point, is to help people. It seems like that's where you're at now. So is this podcasting and getting this message out what you do for a living now?
Yeah, speaking, writing, podcasting. I'm missing a leg. I'm in a wheelchair. I still have tumors in my lungs that I'm treated for at the hospital for an entire week every 3 weeks. So I'm still actively being treated for cancer. So I kind of have that 2 week window where what can I do? How can I help? How can I make a difference? And, somebody suggested I start speaking about my experiences and what I've learned. And I was like, okay, I'll do that. And then COVID hit. And then it was like, well, okay, nobody's doing any speaking either virtually or in person. And somebody reached out to me and said, would you like to be a guest on my podcast? And Brad, this is true. I said, sure. What's a podcast? I had absolutely no idea what a podcast was. And he explained it to me. And I said, okay, I'll give it a try. I'll try it, see how it goes. And honestly, Brad, my first podcast, I was horrible. I was terrible. I provided no value at all to anybody who listened to it. I mean, I had Post-it notes all around the camera. And he would ask me a question. I'd kind of lean in, read one of the Post-it notes. It was like, oh my God, this couldn't be any worse. But then when it was over, I remember thinking, I could see where this would be a medium that I could use to try to get my message out. But I got to get better at this. But I also thought, the first time I ever drove a car, I wasn't any good at it. I mean, the first time I tried to cook a meal, I think I burned the water. First time I studied algebra, I wasn't any good at it. It's like, okay, I'm not good at it. So how can I get better at it? And it's, I think, just a matter of doing it, And I remember I was talking to my publisher once, and I told him, I said, Scott, I listen to every podcast I've ever been on when it comes out. I said, I want to be a better guest. And he's like, no, Terry, it's not about being good. It's just about not sucking. And I said, well, thanks for the title of my next book, just don't suck. Not really. That's not what it's going to be. But, I was like, no, I want to see how many times I say or hum or those filler words, or can I get a better story, or can I condense the story that I'm using? Somebody once told me you should never make a point without telling a story, and you should never tell a story without making a point. So I think stories are incredibly important to not only get my message out, but to help people understand how that message might apply in their lives as well.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Definitely take some practice. I'm not even one, I don't speak a lot. I tend to have a summary, so it's amazing that I would even take this same role to do podcasts, but I like the aspect of having meaningful conversations just in life in general. And so I treat these the same way. Like, this is a conversation between me and you, two human beings on the earth, and we need to have conversations like this even away from the cameras and microphones, because it's a great thing. This is where I learn all the things I learn, and today again I'm getting a boost of learning of not to be selfish, to do what I've been put here on the earth to do, that God put me on the earth here to do, and not myself. It's just a great thing. I've also kind of I've felt my pain in the working world, trying to pretend I'm not miserable at the jobs there. And the same thing happens even at the most miserable job. If I just go, what's the mission here? What's the production that we're trying to do here? And if I just put myself aside and jump in and help where I'm needed, all the bad feelings go away, and I get that positive boost there again. So this is the reason I do this. I'm glad you decided that you would do it. I like your messages. I think they need to be heard, and definitely on this channel also. I think that's quite a way to be rad, as I say, that you're something. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so you wrote a book already, did you say?
I did.
What's the title of that?
The title of the book is called Sustainable Excellence, 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. And it was really a book born out of two conversations I had. I never expected to write a book. And in all honesty, I never wanted to write a book. There's kind of an old joke that says when we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. So, I mean, God has never spoken to me and said, Terry, write a book. But I think what God did, and this has happened to me at other times in my life, where God puts enough people in your path that start making the same suggestion over and over and over again. And I think at this point in my life, I'm smart enough to kind of say, well, I may ought to pay attention to this. So sustainable excellence was, like I said, really born out of two conversations I had. One was with a former player. As mentioned, I coached girls high school basketball when we lived in Texas, who had moved to the area in Colorado. One of my players with her fiance, and my wife and I had dinner with them one night. And I remember saying to her after dinner one night that I was excited that she was living close and I could watch her find and live her purpose. And Brad, she got real quiet for a while. And then she looked at me and she said, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? And I said, I have absolutely no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason or reasons you were put on the face of this earth. And those reasons or reason exists using your unique gifts and talents and living that reason. So that was one conversation. And then I had a young man in college reach out to me on social media, and he asked me what I thought were the most important things that he needed to learn, not to just be successful in his job or in business, but to be successful in life. And I didn't want to give him the, get up early, work hard, help others. I didn't want to give him sort of the cliches that we already know. I wanted to see if I could go deeper with him. So I spent some time and I was taking some notes and kind of had these 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. And so I sent them to him. And then I stepped back and I was like, well, I've got a life story that fits underneath this principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates that principle. So literally during the 4 to 5 months I was healing after I had my leg amputated, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories, and they're real stories about real people underneath each of the principles. And that's how sustainable excellence came to be.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, there is a lot of that information about these 10 things or those 4 things, and that's kind of all you see is just a list. Like you can scroll through X and find those lists one after the other. But yeah, for me, listening to a story like yours, to where you were just where you're supposed to be and these things came to you, that is more of where I find all this stuff too. Is like even how I met you is the same. I set up this profile expecting, I'll get somebody in the future, and then less than 12 hours, you were one of the first ones on there. So it's no accident to me now, having the faith that I have and understanding how God works. He does work through everybody else, but sometimes you can feel like, I'm on this island and I don't know how I'm going to get these resources I need. But for me, I pray, I put myself in the situation, and the people show up. It's beautiful. And then when they show up, I need to be ready to let God's message flow from me to them. So that's how I take it instead of a list. I appreciate that you decided to make a story for like each of the bullet points. That's really cool.
Yeah, again, I think it's more how we learn. I mean, before we had written language or written text and stuff like that, it was how did things get communicated? We told stories. We told about our ancestors and things like that. So I love stories. I totally grabbed it. I have a whole notebook of kind of those lists that you were just talking about, but also of stories that I think talk to me, that speak to my heart or my soul, that it's like, that's a good story. That would be something that would resonate with other people and things like that. So I have this whole notebook, and it's a handwritten notebook. I write these stories down, and I write these sayings and different, I don't know, just different song lyrics, poems, whatever it ends up, it sort of speaks to me. I put it in my notebook. And then when I'm looking for something to write a blog about or something like that, I go through that, and it's like, okay, how can I use this? And how can I develop a story around it, or find a list of something that corresponds to what's being said? So yeah, it all, you're right. I mean, life really kind of it intertwines, and we don't realize just how connected, I guess, we are with each other. One of the nurses that cares for me when I still go for treatment is a former hospice nurse. And for those of your audience who don't understand hospice, it's people who take care of others at the end of their life. It's end of life care. And she gave me a book to read, and the book was called Imagine Heaven. And it's a book about people who have near death experiences. And I learned a lot of things from reading the book, but one of the big takeaways I came away with from the book was no matter who these people having these near death experiences saw during that experience, whether it was Jesus or a saint or an angel or friend or relative, whoever it ends up being, almost everybody, not everybody, but almost everybody got asked one question. And that question was, how do you care for my people? In other words, how do we take care of each other? How do we relate? How do we connect with each other in our lives? And I think if COVID taught us anything, it's how much we need each other. You know, when we were all isolated, when we couldn't be together, you saw alcoholism rates go up, drug abuse rates go up, domestic violence rates go up. We need each other. We need each other to experience joy. We need each other to be fulfilled. We need each other to be successful. Nobody does this life in a vacuum. And if you try to do it in a vacuum, you're not happy. You're not successful. And I think you see that a lot today. You know, it's all about me. I don't care about anybody else. You've got to do what I say. You've got to affirm the way I feel. You've got to do all this. Well, no, I don't. I mean, despite what you think, but let's look at this from how we can connect with each other, not how you can be isolated and tell me what I need. How can we form a relationship? How can we be together for our mutual benefit? Like I said, nobody does this life successfully in a vacuum.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I have this philosophy that God puts us together missing a few pieces on purpose, and it's the other people around us that have those missing pieces, and vice versa. They have the same story. They need the piece we have, we need the piece they have. It's also, I think of it as it's God's Spirit in everybody interacting with God's Spirit in everybody. So definitely does feel more satisfying and fulfilling to follow that guidance along with the things that he keeps telling me, keeps telling you that I need you to do this. And yeah, I've not lacked anything to help another person.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times we think we're bodies and we kind of got a spirit or a soul sort of in there. And I think it's just the opposite. We're actually spirits that kind of have a body that goes along with it. And if you look at it from that paradigm, all of a sudden now it's bigger than us. It's a connection with something that is bigger than us. And it's not about that whole life is about me. No, it's not about you. And those people always seem to be angry and mean and sort of lashing out where, you've got to meet all my needs. Nothing works one way. It's got to be a duality. We've got to, I'd love to help you. I want to help you. But it's kind of like people, and we've seen those people, if you hang around people, there's that whole saying that says we're a product of the 5 people we hang around with the most. If you hang around with people that are good and caring and smart, you're going to be good and caring and smart. Versus if you hang around people that are always negative and it's always about drama and they're sucking the life out of people, then you're going to be that kind of person as well. So I always caution people, hang around with people. And one of the things that I try to recommend to people is that regardless of your job, it's more important who you work with and who you work for than it is the work that you do. Find people that care about you. Find people that are willing to invest in you. Find people that want to see you successful and hitch your wagon to those people and climb your mountains together. I think you'll be a whole lot happier in your life.
Right on. So wonder if you have any tips on how to remove yourself from the negative people and put yourself more in the place of the positive people.
And that can be hard. I mean, especially when those negative people are family members. They're people who maybe even through good intentions, want something kind of like my dad. I don't want you to go in law enforcement because I think it's a lower level job. I want something better for you. My dad did what he did, not out of spite, out of love, but it was sort of a backwards way of living. I guess I would just tell you, find people in your life. And it's hard to find these people. The entrepreneur Ed Milet talked about the four types of people in the world, and the first group he talked about were the motivated, or excuse me, the unmotivated. And he said that's the vast majority of people you will encounter in your life. So if you're looking for people to kind of pump you up and want good things for you, understand that it's going to take some looking. They're just not around every corner. A lot of people only care about themselves. And then the second group he talks about are the motivated people. He said it's kind of a carrot and stick approach to life. If I do this, I will get that. He says it's life strictly based on motivation. It's kind of low level, but it works for a lot of people to be very happy and successful in their life. And then the third group he talks about are the inspirational people. The word inspiration coming from two words, in spirit. So if I'm an inspirational person, I am moving people with my energy. And then the last group he talks about are the aspirational people, where people aspire to be like you. So if you're looking to put those good people in your life, and I think we all should be, understand that they are not, it's not like everybody out there is like that. You're going to have to search, you're going to have to find those people. And when you do, like we just were talking about, it's got to be reciprocal. I mean, if you want good people in your life, you're going to have to be a good person as well, because if you're not, good people are not going to want to hang around you. If you're a caring person, if you're not a caring person and you want caring people to hang around you, they're not going to want to hang around you. So you've almost got to mirror what you want in life. And I think that mirroring, kind of like what you were talking about before, God will put those people in your path. And you've got to be ready, as you said, when those people become part of your path, to act on that, not to be, oh, darn, sorry, because those people they'll go away and you'll be left with the negative people. So understand that it's not something I think that happens overnight. It takes a lot of discernment to decide whether that's a person who I want to be around, who will help me, and also somebody that I want to help as well.
Yeah. Just hearing all that just reminded me, like, my number one solution for dealing with people or any situation is prayer. And sometimes I'm having difficulty with a person, I realize, hey, I didn't even pray at all today, or haven't prayed about or for this person. Sometimes that helps me to be who I need to be, or I could even see, like, the Spirit of God get in those people. They have no idea, and I can see that come through. So it kind of makes some of that task more tolerable. But definitely, again, you need God, you need His Spirit to accomplish anything.
You really do. And I think I'll tell you another story. And this was something, if you're listening to us and you think, well, my life doesn't really matter, I'm not important or, influential or anything like that. No, your life does matter. And I'll tell you why I say that. I had one of the nurses that was caring for me. She has since moved to Florida. But when I first met her, she was young. She was about 25 years old, already a nurse, but learning how to do things on the unit where I'm treated. And about 6 months later, she was on her own and she was taking care of me. And she came in and she said, Terry, I've got a story I want to tell you, but I don't know how to go about telling it to you. And Brad, I didn't know how to respond to that. I was like, well, I hope you decide you want to tell me. It sounds like I might enjoy hearing the story. So she's in and out for a couple hours. And finally she comes in, she sits down, she's like, all right, here's the story. She said, when I first met you, I was going to get out of nursing. I had a very good friend of mine die. I was in a really dark place. I talked to my family. I was going to quit nursing and I was going to go to work for Amazon. And she said, and then I met you. And she said, I see what you go through. I see the reactions. I have a really bad reaction to the medicine that I'm given. And she said, then I went back in your chart and I saw, your amputations and your interferon treatment and everything you'd been through for the last, I think it was 10 years ago that this happened. And she said, when I finished reading your story, I knew I was where I was supposed to be. Now, Brad, if she would have never told me that story, I would have had no idea that my life, just by living my life, had had a positive impact on this young woman. I can promise you, whoever's listening to us, your life matters. There are people that are watching how you handle the difficulty, the adversity in your life, and would give almost everything they have just to walk 5 minutes in your shoes. So don't think your story doesn't matter. Your story does matter, and it absolutely can impact other people.
Yeah, I think that's what I love about podcasts so much. Got people telling their story. I don't consider myself to be a great storyteller, but I have seen that light bulb come on in people when I get down and I do the best I can telling a story, and that's all that matters. I think that's easy for anybody to follow. Be honest and come about it with the spirit of telling the story to help, I suppose, is the best thing to do.
Yeah. And I think you hit an important point there. Be honest, be authentic. I mean, people aren't stupid. They realize when, it's like, oh, this guy thinks he's all that or this, whatever. And I always, I really get nervous about coming across like nothing bad ever happens to me. Things do happen to me. When I get treatment, I am absolutely down. I am mentally, emotionally, physically depleted. I cry sometimes. I feel sorry for myself. There's no S on my chest that do not have a cape and fly around with magical powers. I'm a human being. And I have those times. I feel down and negative. And if you come across like, nothing bad ever happens, everything's always great. No, nothing, nobody experiences that. I don't care how faithful or powerful or whatever they are. But I think authenticity, it's like, this is me, warts and all. If you don't like it, okay. Some people just don't like other people. I get it. That's okay. But I want people to understand that I have bad days. I experience those things. But when I do, I find that I am looking internally, that, woe is me. Look how bad I feel. This is a terrible day. That's all focused on me. And I find a very simple way, at least for me, to turn that around, especially when I'm at the hospital. I'm at the hospital every 3 weeks, is to find another person who's going through treatment or getting chemo or doing something like that, and just say, hey, how's it going? Or smile at them, or you want to talk? Do you want to have a cup of coffee? Now, all of a sudden, I'm not focused on how bad I'm feeling. I'm trying to make a difference in another human being. And when you do that, everything shifts in your life. Your attitude, your perception, you're just smiling at somebody else. We have mirror neurons in our brains that if I smile at you, those mirror neurons will engage and you'll smile. You won't even know you're smiling. Yeah. I mean, that's how our brains work. So smile at somebody and just see if they'll smile back at you.
Yeah. I definitely see all the same things there. But thank you for your story on that. Even in the bad days, you got to look for somebody to help out. I'm a member of AA, and that's the root of that program too, because the way I am naturally is to be opposite. It's human nature. Of course, doesn't just hang on to the alcoholic types, but yeah, being past that first initial problem with the alcohol and the chemicals, I'm still me, and I still fight the selfish part, but it is the only way I find to get a foothold in any situation is to try to help, to be an encouragement, to smile, like you say. I mean, even you in your predicament, you just going and taking your treatment the best you can and being easy for the doctor to deal with that day, that's even helping them out too. Or the courage, it helps the other patients out that see you. It's a great story, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely needed to be reminded that today, that we all have bad days. It can't all just be great. But if we follow what God has asked us to follow, there's a lot more better times, and when they do come, they're a lot more beautiful than all the things that I've ever found on my own power and helping my own self. So I'm glad that it works that way, that I'm in touch with it now and can follow it.
Yeah, it's important. I love the quote from Mother Teresa, who said, God never asked us to be successful. He asked us to be faithful. And, when you kind of put it in that regard, success is great, but it's not something we can take with us when we die, when we go. But those relationships, those connections, those are things that will live on. Those are our legacies, that, how we served our God, our fellow man. We all have unique gifts and talents, and I think that's what God gives us. And then it's our responsibility to use those to try to make the world a better place. I can't change the world, but I can change my little part of it.
Yeah.
And that starts by changing myself.
Yeah. Yeah, the other thing you touched on that I remember, like telling your story, you're exposing yourself, warts and all. Like some people might resonate, might not. It is my experience listening to people that have a rough time speaking. Like there is a translator spiritually that like gives me the pieces and bits of information that was intended, as long as the person is honest and as long as the message is positive, I suppose, too. So I've found that to help me out. But I don't know how your first podcasts were, but you do great now. So.
Well, thank you. I've had a lot of experience. I've probably been a guest on, I'm probably closing in on 700 podcast episodes around the world. And, for me, I really can't travel, not having a leg, being in a wheelchair, it's difficult for me to travel, but I can talk to somebody in Australia or New Zealand or Africa or Mexico and have, sort of that travel experience with them. And like I said, I don't think I've ever been on a podcast that I wasn't supposed to be on, if that makes any sense. That I think God put these in my path. And don't get me wrong, I think there are people that I've been on their show, they shouldn't have a podcast. They're terrible at it. I don't think they provide a lot of value. Personally, that's my opinion, but they do, and they're the people who need to hear them are hearing them, just like the people who I go on their podcast. I think it's God's way of saying you need to be on this podcast. Somebody needs to hear you. And I remember about 6-8 months ago, I got an email from somebody who told me, said, I just listened to your podcast, and it was an episode that I needed to hear that message today. And I remember sending him back saying, hey, that's great. I said, what was the name of the podcast? Because he had not included what the podcast was. And he told me. And Brad, I didn't remember the podcast. I had to go back and look it up. It was a podcast I did 2.5 years ago that person found that episode at just the right time that they needed to hear it.
Yeah, imagine that.
Yeah, exactly. That wasn't coincidence. That was something bigger than you and I.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, how did you come across mine?
I look for, I just don't throw stuff. I'm kind of targeted in the kind of podcast I want to be part of. And I listen, if there's an episode or two out there, I listen to the episodes. Is this something that I think makes sense? Would this be a good fit, in other words? And so that's how, I found yours on Matchmaker. I use Matchmaker and one other app to find podcasts. I do it once a week. I go on, I look for ones that I think are a match, and I send them a note like I sent you. And it's like, nice. This is my story. Do you think this would work for you? And like I said, a lot of them, no, don't think that's going to work. Okay, great. Good luck to you. I hope things work out. But yours seem to, I think we're trying to do the same thing in our lives. And that's why I reached out to you.
That's great, man. Yeah, my day job is as a mechanic. I've always had more of a interest in electronics, though, like music, audio, video. That's the first memory I have is like of a car stereo, just the vision
Okay.
of one in my mom's car, probably when I was in a car seat or something. And just that little itch to tinker with that stuff, with all this stuff, is like the structure of what I'm doing today. But underneath it all, I've always felt like people have been able to share with me. I feel like I'm an okay listener, better than speaking for sure. And so now it's awesome we have these ways to get together and share stories, and I get to learn how to run all this equipment, record it, share it. But as far as your podcast and all the content I've come across from you for the last month or so, your message has been one that I've needed to hear too. So that's a internal benefit of doing this, which I just keep finding. There is so much support from all over the place to do this. So I guess my main point though is I had to put the feelings of doubt aside and go more with faith, like you said. And that caused me to take all these action steps to put all this together, and again to reach out to actually have people be able to find this podcast to be on. So I appreciate that you chose this one, and it was likewise with me. I saw your information and I was like, yeah, that's a grand slam. So
Well, I appreciate you saying that. There's that sort of term imposter syndrome, which I absolutely dislike. But I was on a podcast and the host was a former NFL player. He played for the Titans and the Steelers and a couple other things. I mean, this guy was like 6'6", like 340 pounds, just huge man. And we did the podcast, and then afterwards, he said to me, and I was kind of blown away when he said this. He said, when I first started my podcast, I didn't think anybody would listen to me. I didn't think anybody would care about my story. And I said, Marcus, my gosh, you've reached the pinnacle of your profession. You're at the top. You were a professional athlete. And his brother was also a professional athlete. His brother's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And I'm like, how could you not have thought that people wouldn't want to hear what you have to offer? How did you get to this point? And Brad, I was just, he was like, I just didn't think anybody would think I had anything to offer. So, I mean, when you look at people that you and I probably would look at and say, my gosh, I'd love to listen to your story and hear how you became successful in that, think that their story doesn't matter, you can understand how, like, people like me that are like, I'm nobody. I mean, why don't I have imposter syndrome? Why don't you have it? Because I think we're guided by something bigger than us. We're guided by a God that is like, yeah, I know you're scared. Just do it anyway. Mm-hmm. I'm here with you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly the message, like underneath it all.
Yeah.
And I don't exactly hear that in words, but I hear that in definite response and receipt in the world, for sure.
Right. Right.
Just reminds me there's also an enemy that doesn't want you to tell your story because it leads to God, and the enemy doesn't want you to find that story. So I've heard that called many different things, the resistance, the whatever. But I find my faith gets me above that. My faith is what grants me the power to fight that enemy. And yeah, that's got to be mostly what that is. Also, we discount whatever we're good at a lot. So yeah, I definitely feel like, well, who's going to listen to this or why? But yeah, I tell it anyway. I do it anyway.
Yeah, because even if one person hears it, mm-hmm. even if you make a difference in one person's life, I mean, sometimes I think about that. It's like, did somebody hear what we talked about today and be like, you know what, that changed my life, or that motivated me, or that got me more disciplined, or gave me better habits, or whatever it ends up being? And if the answer to that is yes, I don't care how much money we make. I don't care how famous we get. I don't care, how important we are. That all pales in comparison to we helped another human being. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's, like I said, I don't it's not the number. I never set out, to do 700 podcasts or 1,000. I never set out to do a number. I just set out to try to make people's lives better.
Yeah.
And if that's what I do, if that's what you do, if that's what we do together, man, today's been a great day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. The name of this podcast came into my head like a strike of lightning. It was a reminder of me, Brad, to be rad. And it just seems like it's a good, positive message for everybody else.
It's a great title. Yeah. I mean, it's a great title.
Yeah, it just came to me from heaven, you could say. All I did was I put it in print on the earth. But yeah, I just started doing like little tinkering videos in my garage of things that I loved, and I'm like, what am I going to call this? And then that was it. It's also turned out to have that power in the message. So has my name, but it's not about me. It is a little bit, but mostly I hope to spread that message. I want everybody to be rad. I even heard the definition of radical explained to me since I've had this podcast, and the roots of the word go back to the root. Radical means the root. It's like, what is the very biggest underlying thing? That's what radical really is. So I couldn't imagine that word had that meaning. I didn't know that use of the word.
Yeah.
So it is definitely radical.
I was listening because you did a podcast with somebody who I was listening to that on your site.
Mm-hmm.
I think on the Matchmaker site or one of your sites about that it was a radish, and a radish is a root, and that's what it was something like that, right? You were talking with another. Yeah, it's
a sponsee of mine that I helped take through the steps in AA. I had him for that podcast, and that's what he brought to me. So it's and then he had 100 messages that resonated with me just because I had him sit down and we had that chat, which I think is the point here that I'm trying to make, is people need to have these chats. But the more I do them, the more I put forth to do them, things just keep like reassuring me all the time. Like, yep, radical means this, and I get fed just having these conversations, and I can't go anywhere where I don't soon turn to having one of these conversations. I love it. It's where I learn everything right now.
That's great.
Heck yeah, man. Well, do you have any other kind of a burning desire or things that you really want to make sure that we share while we're together?
I guess let me tell you another story, if you don't mind.
I got time for all your stories, so tell me as many as you want.
Super. When I was little, I was even today, I was a big fan of Westerns, and my mom and dad used to let me stay up late, and your audience probably like, what's this guy talking about? I don't know these, and I would get to watch, Bonanza and Gunsmoke, and my favorite was Wild Wild West. 1993, the movie Tombstone came out, and it starred Val Kilmer as a man by the name of John Doc Holliday and Kurt Russell as a man by the name of Wyatt Earp. Now, Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday were two living, breathing human beings who walked on the face of the earth. They're not made-up characters for the movie. And Doc was called Doc because he was a dentist by trade, but pretty much Doc Holliday was a gunslinger and a card shark. And Wyatt Earp had been some form of a lawman almost his entire adult life. And so these two men from opposite sides of the track, so to speak, somehow come together and form this very close friendship. And at the end of the movie, Doc Holliday is dying at a sanitarium, a hospital in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. And the real Doc Holliday died at that hospital, and he's buried in the Glenwood Springs Cemetery. And Wyatt, at this point in his life, was destitute. He had no money, he had no job, he had no prospects for a job. So every day he'd come to play cards with Doc, and the two men passed the time that way. And in this almost very last scene in the movie, they're talking about what they want out of life. And Doc says, when I was younger, I was in love with my cousin, but she joined a convent over the affair. But she's all that I ever wanted. And then he looks at Wyatt and he says, what about you, Wyatt? What do you want? And Wyatt nonchalantly kind of says, I just want to lead a normal life. And Doc looks at him and says one of the greatest lines I've ever heard in a movie. He said, there's no normal, there's just life.
Oh, that's
And get
cool.
on with living yours. Brad, you and I probably know people, there's probably people listening to us that are sort of holding back and sitting back and saying, well, when this happens, maybe I'll have a normal life. Or when that occurs, maybe I'll have a successful life. Or when this transpires, maybe I'll have a significant life. I guess what I'd like to leave your audience with is this: don't wait. Don't wait for life to come to you. Get out there, find the reason you were put on the face of this earth, and there is a reason, and live that life. Because if you do, at the end of your life, I'm going to promise you two things. Number one, you're going to be a whole lot happier. And number two, you're going to have a whole lot more peace in your heart.
Yeah, man. Amen to that. I've found that it just boils down to being honest again. Like, if you're looking for that something, get honest. Like, what do you enjoy? What do you want to do? I've found it to be in that envelope of it's things that I'm inclined to want to do already. And I guess couple that with the purpose of trying to do good and trying to change the world in a positive way. That's all great. And then, like you said, just to reiterate that, you just got to show up, take the steps, do the work. That's the secret to life.
Yes, it is. It's not hard, but it's difficult for a lot of people.
Right on, man. Well, where else can we find you?
So I have a website called Motivational Check. Every day, as you alluded to, I put up a thought for the day. And a lot of times with that thought comes a question about how maybe you could implement that thought into your life. I have recommendations for books to read, videos to watch. You can get access to my social media links there. And you can leave me a message, and that's all at motivationalcheck.com.
Nice. And your book title one more time?
Sustainable Excellence, the 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life.
Nice. So you find all that on the website, or is that in Amazon or any other place?
Yeah, that's all on the website. There's a link to the Amazon link for the book, but you can get Sustainable Excellence anywhere you get a book online, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks, wherever you get your books.
Very nice. Well, Terry, I thank you very much. I've learned some more today. I feel fulfilled today. Got that peace and just, yeah, I'm glad we had this chat. Thanks for coming on.
Well, Brad, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed talking with you today.
All right, man. We'll do it again sometime.
I'd love to do that.
All right, buddy. Thank you.
Thank you.